Inside the magic realm, a world filled with limitless possibilities. There are people who can fly broomsticks and levitate objects using the power of their minds. Everyone can use magic like it's part of their everyday life, and it determines everything in this world. But in the corner of a forest, where dragons fly as it's also normal, some animals are shocked to the bone, because there is one existence that defies the natural order. Mash racks the inhuman weight, and begins eating a cream puff like he always does. Deep inside the forest, an old man controls magic to pour himself a cup of coffee. He has been hiding in the forest with Mash his entire life so that others don't find out about his existence. Nothing bothers him anymore though, because his experiences have given him a way to combat stress. Mash barges in and breaks the door, causing his grandpa to scream in insanity. He yells at him for destroying the door, but Mash couldn't remember if he was supposed to pull or push, so he decided to just force it open. Mash apologizes and says he will fix it, but as he goes on to fix it, he clumsily smashes the door, which makes the old man scream again. He keeps pounding the door in and out until he completely destroys it in half. Roger finally gives up and realizes this kid has no hope. They then enjoy a cup of tea together, and Mash asks his grandpa why all of his workouts are purely physical. Roger tries to think of a reason to give Mash without revealing the truth because in this world Mash is the only one without the ability to use magic. He decides to reveal the truth at a different time, and tells Mash not to break the door while he's gone. Mash says that he knows how to fix it, but Roger yells at him to just learn how to open it like a normal person instead. Before heading out, Mash's grandpa warns him once again to never venture into the city, and Mash promises that he won't. While his grandpa was chilling out somewhere, Mash spots a flyer from the city about a special new cream puff, and he wasn't going to let it go to waste. As he walked around the city, he saw everyone using magic to perform all sorts of things, but everything they used magic for, he could have done all of these with his hands. He approaches the cream puff stand and pays for his order, but all of his coins are just bent in half. This startles the merchant, but Mash decides to take it back and snaps the coin into its proper position. The poor man is scared by what he just witnessed, but eventually creates his order and hands it to him. A gust of wind comes by, revealing Mash's face. In that split moment, everyone in town saw it. He was the only one without a scar on his face, but Mash has no idea why they were all staring at him. Meanwhile, a policeman is torturing a criminal for stealing and wasting his time but receives a call in the middle of his work while Mash continues walking around the city. Everyone continues staring at him in shock and he keeps going until he bumps into a police officer and soils his shirt. The dumbass man continues drinking and yells at him, knocking the cream puff out of his hand, and asks Mash what he's going to do about his clothes. Mash is smart enough to shut off the dumbass policeman. He uses his Giga Chad muscles and rips the clothes off the police officer. This infuriates the police officer and he continues yelling at him. Meanwhile, his superior Brad Coleman comes from behind. He wonders why his comrade is shirtless but realizes that the unmarked child he is looking for happens to be here. Before he could approach him for questioning, Mash's grandpa runs in and takes him out of the situation as fast as he can. Brad thinks this may be his chance for a promotion and casts some magical bird to follow their location. Inside their cabin, Mash's grandpa yells at him for breaking his promise, so Mash sincerely apologizes. Roger thinks he can't stay mad at him when he makes this face, so he commands him to redo today's training routine as punishment. Mash agrees and hands him the cream puffs he got for him. He begins walking toward the door, but Roger already knows how this is going to end, so he opens the door for him to avoid having it broken again. While Mash is reckless, he understands why his son has done this. He's a teenager after all and they've been hiding away from this city all this time. All of a sudden, he sees a magical bird staring at him, and at the same time the entire entrance gets exploded by the police, and the poor old man can't even get a chance to flee. A squirrel notices something is off and sees Mash carrying the weight like it's a toy. The poor squirrel doesn't know how much this weighs off but is shocked to the bones and forced to be frozen. Mash heads back to the broken door, but forgets if he was supposed to push or pull. Before he breaks the door down, he hears the voice of the police officers inside. They have restrained his grandpa for hiding a person incapable of using magic. Because in this world, anyone incapable of using it must be eliminated. Mash realizes the truth of his situation, but his grandpa won't reveal his location at all. No matter how hard they beat him, the old man has sworn to never reveal Mash's location. He remembers when he was young and how his mom would yell at him for having such a weak magical ability. Even his bosses would constantly call him useless for how incapable he was. He kept failing his entire life because of his weak magical talent, and got fired from every job he ever had. He felt completely unwanted and wanted to hug the ground. But before he was ready to hug the ground passionately, he heard a baby crying. It had no magical scar, and he realized that it must have been abandoned just like him. The baby was excited to have a person hugging him, and this was the first time Roger ever felt like someone needed him. He had sworn ever since that even if the world denied his existence, and they weren't related by blood, he would become a father to that baby. He screams at Mash to run away, but the police officer begins beating him. He prays that Mash is able to run away from here and keeps screaming at him to leave. The officer has had enough of this and prepares a magical blow to end the old man. His subordinates are ready to look for him, but Mash destroys the door and punches the police officer in the face, sending him launching into the wall and destroying it. Mash stares at the people standing in his way, and the big police officer faces off with him. But Mash rips his shirt off again and begins slapping him until he knocks him out of the way. Mash has come back and tells his grandpa that he would never leave the only family he has. He looks at Brad and tells him that he will be sending him to hell. But what he doesn't know is that Brad is one of the strongest mages in the entirety of the world, so Mash would never stand a chance. Brad prepares to use his ultimate magical spell that even drove a dragon away and sends the magic ability launching towards Mash. The giant explosion sends plumes of smoke coming from the home, but when they disappear, Mash is standing there as if nothing has happened. The ultimate magical ability that drove away even a dragon was slapped by Mash. Brad prepares to use a magical power that would destroy this entire city, and he sends it, launching toward Mash. But before it can even scathe him, Mash slaps it away once more deep into the forest. The officer continues sending his magical blows, but Mash deals with them like they're volleyballs and even begins juggling them. After dealing with all the attacks, Mash decides to pick up his grandpa's wand, and the officer thinks he's about to use magic, so he prepares a defense circle to ward off any magical attack that may come. But Mash gets into a baseball pitching position and throws the wand straight toward Brad. Brad bends over and finally realizes that Mash's long wand was able to penetrate his defenses. Mash tells him that if he threatens his family ever again, he will not wake up to see the next day. Brad laughs and says he will allow his family to stay hidden on one condition. Every year one student is promoted to a divine visionary. He will allow his family to stay hidden if he's able to become that divine visionary, because then it will mean even God accepted him. Society will have no choice but to follow along, and Brad gets to gain all the fame and fortune that will come from it. Mash's grandpa warns him to not believe those words so easily, but Brad tells him that the entire country will hunt him down if he refuses. This is his only option now, and if he wants to continue surviving, he may be fine, but his old man won't be. After hearing those words, Mash gladly accepts this challenge. His grandpa yells at him that he wouldn't even be able to survive in a magical school. But Mash only cares about one thing: living in peace with his grandpa, even if it's attending the darkest magical school in all of the world and risking his life to live peacefully with his grandpa. He will crush any challenge with his bare fists. The Eastern Magic Academy is one of the most prestigious schools in the entirety of the magical realm. Not even 3% of all applicants can get in, making it harder than even Harvard. Only those with the greatest magical powers will be able to make it past the entrance gates. The entrance exam professor, Professor Lucci, overlooks all the students who have come to take the entrance exam. He thinks that all of these students look mediocre, but he gets his eye opened when he sees Mash is out here doing power cleans like he's an NFL player. Lucci wondered why this is important to pump up his muscles before attending an exam that prioritizes magic rather than a good physique. Mash went on to start doing the invisible chair in front of him. What puzzled Lucy the most, however, was the dumbass trying to hide behind Mash like they're trees. Roger wonders if this would work, but Brad tells him that they even created a fake scar for him. Lucci thinks that slackers like him will fail anyway, and goes on to begin the entrance ceremony. He appears from a plume of fire and introduces himself as the 7th greatest magician. Mash says it must have been hot coming out of the fire like that, and this pisses Lucci off. He tells everyone to take their seats and uses his magical ability to spawn desks along with papers and pens. But out Giga Chad is still there to break down his prestige. Lucci tries to ignore all these attacks because someone like him is sure to fail the entrance exam. The students look at the test paper and see all the words squirming around. This was the exam. Brad and Roger wonder why they ever thought Mash could ever pass this test. Mash commands the words to stop moving, but nothing happens. Pissed off, he angrily crushes his pen and commands them to stop moving, so the words get scared of him and come to a stop. Lucci thinks he probably just randomly scribbled, but sees all the words lined perfectly. Mash goes on to make the boulder appear to float and is even fast enough to run above the water. He found every possible way to pass the tests without using magic, and this infuriated Lucci. So for the next exam, he made a giant maze appear. But this was no ordinary maze. It was filled with traps that you could only pass with your magical ability. Mash thinks this is the easiest of all tests so far, but the biggest bait that even emperors couldn't bypass entered into the field. She begged him to help her because she would give him some top as a reward. Mash is a Giga Chad, so he accepted her offer. They began walking together and the girl tripped and fell flat on her face. They keep walking and she manages to fall into a trap, but Mash is still in it just for the top. He starts running before it's too late for the tests, so the girl uses her magical ability to restrain him with metal cuffs. She reveals that she'd been deceiving him this whole time so he doesn't make it to the goal area. Mash thinks it's unfortunate that he's been deceived and breaks the metal cuffs, shocking the girl. He runs faster than the Flash, and before the girl is able to respond, a giant pharaoh approaches her. Pharaoh demands that she answer a puzzle, or he will kill her. He says 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. What creature is this? Lemon, yes, that's her name. Forget she's a human because she's been called a fruit her entire life. She tries to raise her wand to fight against the monster, but the pharaoh knocks her wand out and threatens her to answer immediately. She struggles to think, but her time is up. In the last moment when she's about to die, she screams for help but realizes that she doesn't deserve it. After all, she was the one who deceived others anyway. In the last instant before the wand ends her, Mash comes in and says that a creature like that couldn't possibly exist. Lemon wonders why he came back to rescue her after she deceived him, and he tells her that he kind of felt sorry for her. She wonders how they're going to pass since the time for the test is almost up. At the very last moment, all the students hear rumbling and the sound of destruction. She thinks there is no way he would be able to break through those 1-meter thick walls, but Mash is the absolute Giga Chad, alpha male, and has destroyed every single wall in his way. The Grandmaster sees this and thinks he's an interesting applicant. However, all the students accuse him of merely cheating and scream at him to go home. Poor Mash gets sad and wants to go home himself. He takes the criticism of everyone yelling at him, but Lemon yells at them to stop because it wasn't his fault. Lucci yells at her to stop talking before he reconsiders the promise he made to her. But Lemon goes on to reveal that she was merely following Lucci's orders to deceive Mash because if she was successful, he would allow her to attend the school, which would save her family from their poverty. Even though she deceived him, Mash still saved her and proposed to marry her. Mash tries to explain the actual situation, but she still thinks he was confessing his love to her. Lucci smiles, saying there was nothing wrong with what he did because he's the examiner after all. These two are merely useless, so he wanted to dispose of them. He calls Lemon stupid and says that's why she's had a miserable life. He activates a magical circle, telling Mash to challenge him. If he wishes to somehow pass, the entire field overflows with his magical powers. Mash tells him that he's going too far, and Roger and Brad think that they should have expected it. Lucci is ready to fight him off, but the headmaster appears in the sky and says they will be moving on to interviews now. He tells Lucci to meet him in his office after this. The first person to be interviewed is Mash, and they begin the interview right away. He asks him why he chose this academy, and Mash thinks about it. Mash states that he wanted to live in peace with his family, and the Grandmaster accepts that answer. The principal goes on to ask why he saved the girl even if it would risk failing the test. Mash says he didn't want to regret not saving her. He says that even if the Sphinx was stronger than him, he still needed to find a way to save her. The Grand Master warns him that there are monsters out there that would overwhelm him, so he asks him what he would do in those situations. He goes on to use magical power to summon a giant creature, and challenges Mash to face him. This extraordinary power even sends fear into the other council members, and the Grand Master explains that his grandpa's soul is latched inside of this monster. But that's not all. If the knife stabbed into the doll, his grandpa would never return. Mash tries to punch the knife but just bleeds from its sheer power. The Grand Master tells him that he can't do anything in this situation, but Mash uses his arm to stop the knife from moving down. He knows that the headmaster can't keep something this big in existence for a long time, so he just needs to endure this until the headmaster runs out of mana. Headmaster is impressed because he'd always been looking for a strong person who wants to help the weak, and he's finally found someone like that. The test is over and the headmaster apologizes for testing him for the final time. Mash accepts the apology and answers his question. If he had to face the headmaster to save his loved one, he'd knock the stuffing out of him with his fist. The rest of the council yells at his disrespectful reply, but the Grand Master welcomes him to the academy. That was the way Mash passed the entrance exam and became a student. During his first day in class, the teacher shows everyone how to use magic to open a lock. She tells the students to try it, so Mash decides to snap the lock in half. The teacher yells and says this is a magical school, but Mash, who is a Giga Chad, believes in using his muscles. His classmate thinks that Mash might be a troublesome student. A group of students overlook Mash's table and smile suspiciously. Mash's classmate hopes that they won't be roommates. But when he goes to his room, he doesn't see the door. The guy introduces himself as Finn and Mash introduces himself back. He begins introducing his muscles and Finn thinks this guy is a psycho. After meeting each other, Mash asks him how a student can become a divine visionary. Mash goes on to explain that this is actually a spy family, and they need to collect 10 gold coins while keeping their grades up. Mash thinks he's going to have difficulty here. To thank him for his information, Mash hands him a cream puff and they celebrate their new friendship. A few weeks later, Mash had a broomstick challenge coming up, so he asked Finn if he could borrow his broomstick because instead of buying a broomstick, the bonehead bought a burdock accidentally. Finn is disappointed by Mash's stupidity, but allows him to borrow his broomstick. Mash calls him a great friend. During class, the teacher introduces everyone to their objective of the day, and everyone begins calling forth their broomstick to start flying. Mash looks at his broomstick and commands it to fly. It doesn't listen, so he continues commanding it to fly. A kid comes up and asks him how he isn't even able to fly a broomstick. So Mash strikes the ground with his foot to make the broomstick fly, and then commands it to fly. He thinks Mash was cheating, but Mash pretends like he has no idea what's going on. To save himself from embarrassment, he challenges Mash to a race on the broomstick, but what Mash doesn't know is that this kid is the best broomstick rider in the entire academy. The teacher wonders how this clutch from yesterday's class is even able to fly, but she begins the race. Mash instantly finishes the race. And the guy wonders where he went wrong in his life. The teacher is impressed by his speed to set a world record. A mysterious man viewed this happening. And Finn knows the truth. Mash threw his broom at light speeds and jumped towards it to mount it in midair. The student accuses Mash of cheating. But Mash tells him to face the facts already because he feels bad for him. Infuriated, the student is about to start yelling at Mash, but a magical ability restrains his mouth. The blonde kid comes and apologizes on his friend's behalf. His name is Cavill, and everyone in the class fears this guy. Cavill asks him if he would like to be friends and introduces himself, but Mash thinks he looks like a cabbage. Cavill tries to shake hands with him, but the teacher tells him to piss off already and stop interrupting in the middle of the class. So Cavill tells Mash to come and see him here after school. Outside of class, Cavill beats up his friend for embarrassing him and not following orders, but at least he found a fun toy. While walking with Finn, Mash asks him who this Cavill is and why everyone is afraid of him. Finn reveals that his father is inside the Bureau of Magic, the most important entity in this world. Mash of course knew all about it, and Finn goes on to reveal that Cavill has close tie with the vice principal, so they will expel him if he defies Cavill. This is why everyone obeys him, and they're all scared. The next day in class, Mash's notebook is all torn and Cavill's lackeys laugh at him. Cavill approaches him and asks him why he didn't show up yesterday. Cavill reveals he's heard that Mash wants to become a divine visionary and promises to help him in achieving his goal. His only condition is to follow his orders. So Mash goes on to do every single thing that Cavill requests of him, and Finn notices. Still, his notebooks continue being torn up and Mash asks Finn for his notebooks. Finn tries to reject, but Mash instantly teleports and takes his notebook, and calls him a lifesaver. He hands him some cream puffs as a thank you, and then goes on to say that he's really glad to have a great guy like Finn as his friend. Mash continues obeying all of Cavill's orders, so Cavill pours water right in front of him and asks him to clean it up. Mash considers the situation and decides to clean it up anyway. After a while, he is impressed by how well he cleaned it. While getting up, Finn's notebook drops from his coat. Cavill says he's getting bored of textbooks, so he commands Finn to burn Mash's clothes. Finn apologizes because he can't do this anymore, begging Cavill to end this. Cavill uses his magical abilities to restrain him and makes him get on his knees to apologize. Mash walks to give Finn his notebook back. But then what he sees before him shocks him. Mash asks Cavill what he's doing and he tells Mash that he's just getting an apology. Mash walks toward Finn and asks him if he's okay. Finn tells him that he's alright but begins crying, saying that he was the one who's been ruining his notebooks this entire time. He's been too scared to disobey. But when he heard him saying that he's been a great friend, he couldn't handle it anymore. He just wanted to apologize to Mash, and Cavill wishes he would have gotten such a sincere apology. Afterward, he reveals that he's going to dine with the vice principal and tells Mash to ditch this lackey before he misses his chance. Mash walks towards Cavill, grabbing his hair and smashing his head into the ground, knocking him unconscious. Cavill's friends are shocked and Mash doesn't care if he's expelled. He then realizes that he does care if he's expelled. The vice principal appears, telling him that he witnessed this entire incident. It was a violent attack and both Mash and Finn will have to deal with the consequences. And since they're of different status, they will also have a different treatment. He will enlighten the idiots. But Mash rushes forward and gives him a fierce roundhouse kick. The vice principal vows to expel Mash right at this instant, and uses his magic wand. But Mash shoves his face with dirt. He goes on to dig the ground behind him, carrying him and tossing him into the pit, and begins burying him. If he can expel Mash at any time, then Mash can also bury him whenever he wants. Even if he throws Mash in prison or cuts his body, he will crawl and bury him. Later on, Mash is summoned before the headmaster. The principal asks him if he knows why he's here, but Mash pretends as if nothing has happened. After a little tacit, the principal says he can't go around burying the vice principal and punching Cavill. He has the order to expel him from the Bureau of Magic, the highest legal authority in this world. Divine visionaries are the ones running this bureau, which means Mash has done something unforgivable. The headmaster takes a paper and burns it, saying that it's more unforgivable to punish the ones who care. This is the reason he became the headmaster, to make sure this injustice doesn't continue passing. His only hope is that a person like Mash will one day become a divine visionary, but Mash reveals that he's already dedicated to becoming one. The headmaster loves this spirit, and goes on to try to teach Mash how to become one. But after only 20 seconds of explanation, Mash passes out from information overload. The headmaster tries to wake him up and tells him to just do well in his classes to get as many coins as possible. At the same time, the headmaster promises that he will do everything to protect him from the Bureau of Magic. There is one more problem that Mash will inevitably have to face, but the headmaster is confident that Mash will be able to overcome it. This was the way the vice principal and Cavill were destroyed. But Mash became recognized by everyone at the academy. The next day, Mash walks with Finn while teaching him how to create a cream puff. A guy comes up to him. His name is Tom, and all the girls go crazy over him. The guy reveals that they will be competing using their broomsticks, something very similar to Harry Potter. Tom grabs Mash, telling him that they're counting on him to be at the game tomorrow. Mash feels suppressed but can't refuse him. At the match the next day, Mash tries to tell them that he can't ride a broomstick. The match begins and everyone begins flying around to pass the ball. However, everyone in the stands realizes that Mash isn't flying and begin throwing stuff at him and telling him to go home. Mash also wants to go home. The crowd begins thinking that the match is rigged while Mash stands on the ground. The captain approaches Mash. The captain tells Mash that he swore to be number one. But Mash didn't. The captain tells him to quit being lazy, but Mash says he's not. He tells him to remember the mighty bamboo because it can survive any climate, and Mash right now is lacking the bamboo. Mash doesn't know what this guy is taking, but he sure wants some of it. He tried to explain the rules one more time and tells him they're basically playing a Harry Potter game. The enemy team is almost 40 points ahead of them, and he hands Mash the broom, telling him that bamboos that can't fly are just shoots. Mash didn't know you could enchant mushrooms with magic, but this guy is something else. Tom's single objective is to put everything he has into this match, which is why he recruited Mash. He heads back out in the game, leaving and encouraged Mash to start playing. But an opponent directly flies into Tom and knocks him off, claiming it was just an accident. They continue scoring while Tom is knocked out. And Tom thinks he might have broken a bone. Tom asks did he throw away all his ethics. But the guy replies that he only cares about winning and calls them wusses. With the huge lead they have against them, Tom thinks this situation is pathetic but wants Mash to know one thing: winning doesn't matter, it's whether he gives it his all. The enemy team has a 50 points lead against Mash's team, but Mash picks up his broomstick and strengthens his grip. He launches towards the sky in an epic leap, and to everyone's surprise he appears to be flying. He asks his teammates to pass the ball to him, but the entire field thinks he must be joking to try and throw the ball from this distance. The opponents begin flying towards him to steal the ball, but Mash prepares a strong throw and uses all of his might to make the ball fly past the opponents, scoring from beyond half field. However, they're still down 49 points and the time is almost up, but the ball begins flying back like a boomerang to Mash, and he prepares another strike. His fingers strike with accurate precision to ensure the ball curves right back to him. He continues preparing strike after strike, and before everyone knows it, the score begins flying off the chart. Witnessing this, Lemon is overwhelmed, and maybe she will be offering him her tops tonight. However, the score reaches the limit on the board and the winner is declared to be Mash's team for winning such a narrow comeback situation, and Mash won a silver coin. Finn congratulates Mash on getting a silver coin for breaking the world record, but Mash pledges he won't ever do that again. This was the recap of episodes 1, 2 and 3. We will upload the rest of the episodes soon. Till then, be safe and chill out.